1 So it begins. You are listening at FameTV.info. First things first, this is YOI. AKA boys love, or a male-ex-male relationship. If this is not your cup of tea, then please do not continue. I am only putting up the first chapter for now. I will post more if people like it. If not, then, oh well I guess. I'm not in the best mindset right now, so this might backfire on me, but like I said, oh well. Anyways, thank you to my awesome beta and unfortunate compatriot, the Blue Necromancer. This story is up on AO3 as well, with more chapters, so I'm putting all the tags here for you to look at. Tags. Graphic depictions of violence, /non-con, Kusuk Black / Aloys Kieran, Keiko / Aloys Kieran, Kusuk Black, Aloys Kieran, Lyle Kieran, Riker Kieran, Kane Kieran, Mika Donovan, Sashka, Raven, Ivankov, Ebony Kieran, original male character / original male character. Freeform, demons, fantasy, alternate worlds, angst with a happy ending, violence, gore, falling in love, reincarnation, suicidal thoughts, emotional hurt / comfort, /non-con elements, murder, vampires, incubus, blood drinking, anal sex, anal fingering, rimming, blow jobs, public sex, cum shot, porn with plot, porn with feelings, wizards, warlocks, witches. After reading these tags, and deciding to move forward, I welcome you, and hope you enjoy. Part 1 Chapter 1 The warm sunlight that flicked across his eyelids, the soft grass that brushed across his fingertips, clouds so white it hurt to look at them, and warm hands that caressed his skin. These were the things that Q had dreamed about more times than he could count. There were no words, or sounds, except the gentle whine through the trees and insects all around him. Ever since he was little, Kyusuk had always had these dreams. Sometimes they were vivid and clear and others were so hazy and so confusing it made his head spin, but despite that, Kyo looked forward to those small movies that played in his head. They seemed more real to him than he would admit to anyone else. He felt safe, loved, and even happy. Unfortunately, though, when the movies ended, he had to wake up every day to reality. It wasn't that he was complaining, it's just Kyusuk knew that he was different from others. He had grown up right next to the red light district of the city in a 3-story brick orphanage he had long since learned to hate. But it wasn't just the slums he hated, it was also the people. People seemed to gather around him, wanted to love him, care for him. At first, they all seemed so genuine, but he learned at a young age that they were all liars. At the orphanage, it wasn't unusual to see adults gather around him. They'd offer him candy, money and even places in their homes. Until they learned of the nightmares and the things he said he saw around him. Most of the kids he had lived with had hated him because of his weird aura and the constant attention he seemed to get, but after the 4th time of being returned to the orphanage, he found the loneliness comforting. Now, though, he was a grown man, living on his own in a decent part of the city, with a paying job. He ate what he wanted, which wasn't much, but he had no one to answer to except himself, and if he didn't like someone staring at him, he could freely tell them to fuck off. He should have been happy. But he wasn't. Over the years he had developed a hard shell of sarcasm, sharp words, and snarky attitude. He had completely closed his heart to others and had managed to convince himself that he was fine with that. With his bad attitude, the only reason he was tolerated at all in society was probably because he had a pretty face and was easy on the eyes. Q huffed to himself as he turned off to his street and toward the subway station to commute to work as per usual. It was supposed to be an ordinary day, but at 3 in the afternoon the train cars were full, the passengers packed like sardines in a can. The purple-haired teen grumbled to himself at his stupidity for not taking an early train, but what was done was done. He shifted the bag on his left shoulder to his right, mentally counting down the seconds till the train came to his stop and he could escape the heavy gazes of the passengers beside him. He felt someone brush against him and he stiffened. He hid his barely concealed irritation behind his emotionless facade as he started to count again. Then came another touch, and then another. He felt sick when he felt hot breaths on his neck. There was nowhere to run, nowhere he could escape the molester's reach. Q's breath became labored as his body began to shake and sweat. Thankfully the doors suddenly hissed open, and he got off at the first opportunity, practically leaping onto the platform and hit the ground running. He rounded the corner as he avoided any sort of eye contact, and found himself unexpectedly on the ground, peering up through his dark lashes to find what the fuck he had run into. It seemed he had run into a well-dressed businessman. He was tall, lean, and his hair was dark as blood. His tailored suit jacket was stained with whatever he had been drinking, and his briefcase was wide open with his folders spilled out onto the pavement. But it wasn't any of those things that set Q's heart into a scattered panic. It was the man's eyes. They were dark as amber, and they were filled with some kind of hidden intent he couldn't put a name to. Q was so stunned that he didn't realize that the man had stood up and was now offering out his hand. "I am so sorry," he said sincerely to Q and flashed a disarming smile full of teeth, but the purplet was anything but put at ease. When he was able to break away from those predatory eyes, he smacked the hand away and scrambled to his own feet. He didn't offer a word of apology as he tried to bolt. "Hey," the man chuckled, and reached out and snagged Q's wrist to stop him. "Wait, please. Let go." Q screamed suddenly. The man let go in surprise, which gave the purplet a chance to make quick with his escape. He felt nauseous. The place where the man touched throbbed with a deep kind of pain he couldn't describe. Q clutched his bag as he ran up the stone steps, but by the time he reached the top he was out of stamina and out of breath. He leaned with his hands on his knees as he took shuddered breaths, and prayed to whatever God was out there that the man wouldn't follow him. But a moment later he knew he had no such luck. "Hey! Purple-haired kid. Wait." Q let out a breathless curse and took off again. He tore down the sidewalk like hell was on his heels, and his lack of athleticism be damned. Like he'd let himself be caught by that guy. Q had felt a strange tug inside him when they had locked eyes, and he hadn't liked the way that they had widened when the bastard had looked at him like he had seen something worth playing with. Q hurried as quickly as he could, his hands and legs shaking with effort and adrenaline when he rounded another corner and came onto Main Street. He was right next to the nearest sidewalk, and he stepped up to the crosswalk button and frantically pushed the signal button with the pad of his thumb. With every second his anxiety rose, and he felt the man getting closer. It wasn't that he felt threatened exactly, but he was not too keen on confronting the man. He reminded the purplet of a wild animal, and he certainly didn't want to see the outcome of associating with him. When he heard the sharp chirp of the walk signal he made a break for it. It seemed to take forever to cross the street, but finally, he made it over to the other side of the street, and just as the traffic started up again, he saw the red-haired man. He was looking right at Q, his expression a mix of slightly annoyed and exasperated. Q didn't waste any time in hurrying on and heading toward his job without a second glance. Throughout the day Q couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, but every time he turned to look around, there was no one there. He tried to rationalize that the man from the station was the cause of his paranoia, but there was a part of his brain that didn't quite believe that. He broke more plates and cups that day than he had in the entire 2 years he had worked at the cafe, and he got scolded shamelessly in front of the customers by his boss. Embarrassment and anger made him blush, and Q, being Q, did the only thing he could do when he was embarrassed or angry. He ran his mouth, Q, through his apron into the owner's face with a few colorful phrases that involved describing what the owner could do to his dick that had everyone in the cafe blushing, and mothers covering their children's ears. He wasn't going to let some guy tell him that he was a lazy, good-for-nothing guttersnipe and that he had no work ethic or respect for authority. "And I hope this fucking place goes to hell," he screamed as he grabbed his bag and left the door wide open with his exit. He was so angry that he stormed out into the night with no clue where he was going. When he finally calmed down to think rationally, he had no idea where he was. Q cursed out loud in frustration and tried to backtrack, but nothing he saw looked familiar. He groaned this time in self-pity. Of all the times, he grumbled to himself as he crossed a street and went around a building. He stopped in his tracks. There were some odd shadows silhouetted against the brick wall in front of him, and on the pavement was a woman. Her body was in a position that looked painful, and after another moment Q blinked in horror and disbelief. Standing over her was a creature of some sort draped in black, bubbling liquid, and its eyes glowed a sickly red. It looked like the thing was eating her. But when he blinked again, his gaze shifted and then it was gone. Q shuddered, and he turned away and slowly retreated a safe distance before he began to run like hell was on his heels. That he went around another building, and this time he saw a pack of those things. They, unfortunately, had no prey to keep them occupied, so their gazes fell on him. He had no idea if this was another one of his copious delusions, or whatever, but when the largest dog-like thing took a threatening step toward him, he didn't wait and stick around to find out. Q was not fast on feet by any means, but when he found his life or chastity on the line he seemed to have the energy, and then some, to help him get away from whatever he had deemed dangerous. And right now, these hellish dog things were the source of his terror. He heard the things give chase, and he opted to stay away from the allies and other narrow places he could get easily trapped in. Hills too, but didn't that kind of thing only apply to bears? He suddenly dropped the thought as he was rammed in the side, and sent sprawled out on the pavement. He landed in a trash bag and heard a sickening and muffled crunch. Pain blossomed in his leg, but he was more concerned with the beast that seemed to have him pinned to the wall. Q shook in fear and reflexively swung his bag at the animal with a scream of terror as it tried to lunge at him. He felt the bag make contact, but he took off again, running as fast as legs could go as soon as he was free. He gasped in a mix of pain and breathlessness as he ran down the dark alley, and his heart raced. Why was this happening? Better yet, what was happening? Asuke used to have delusions often when he was a child, constantly plagued by nightmares, and skittish of every shadow, but it had never gotten this bad. Most of the time when he ignored them, the delusions would eventually go away, but this time was different. He thought that the medicine he had been taking had helped cure him, but apparently not. Asuke's green eyes caught movement in the dark shadows, and his hands instantly went to pepper spray in his pocket. A fat lot of good it would do if it was more of those things though. Strands of his shaggy, long purple hair were hanging in front his face, but he hastily pushed it aside to clear his vision as he ran. What he saw in the darkness was a glowing red eye. Shit, those things were going to catch up to him soon, but now he was trapped by something else. That he tensed, his arms raised. His legs shaking badly from exhaustion, but he didn't stop running. He didn't dare. Strange, you actually noticed me. Seems that I'm getting rusty with my skills, a baritone accent that had Q's heart throbbing in his chest stated as he stepped out of the shadows and into the dim light of a nearby street lamp. His eyes started to glow dimly, one red and one a luminescent green. I wonder whether it's me or if it's you that has good instincts. Q was almost frozen again in fear. He was reminded of the man from the train station. The younger man tried to stop as fast he could, but at a full sprint, it was almost too late even then. His full stop brought him almost chest to chest with the white-haired stranger. The purplet collected himself and stumbled back, and brought the hand that clutched the pepper spray out of his hoodie pocket. What's it to you? Anyone could see you out here loitering around. Now if you don't mind, I need to get going, he said in a hurried tone as he tried to keep the desperation out of his voice, and tried to step around the man. No, not just anyone. I am practically part of the shadows when I want to be. So, what are you running from? The man asked as he slowly paced around the boy. There was interest clearly written on his face, and Q didn't like it one bit. That's none of your business. Q snapped, his face flushed from the expression on the other man's face and the fact that he had been running from a pack of possibly mutant creatures. Now let me pass. Q could tell that the animals were gaining on him, and his left leg was trembling as he shifted his weight onto it. He stifled a hiss of pain and ignored the wet feeling of blood dripping from his thigh as it soaked his jeans. The man's eyes started to glow brighter, and his gaze sharpened. So, something injured you and now you're running from it. And no, I'm afraid I'm not going to let you pass. I was hungry and, love, I am afraid you just made it worse. I'm going to get rid of the nuisances and then come back to get you, understand? He grinned at Q devilishly, and it was quite obvious he wanted a fight as he bent down and reached into his boots to pull out a set of twin daggers. Q was unsettled. Who the fuck was this nut job? What the heck are you talking about? I don't think that you can even touch those things, let alone kill them, but if you do, I certainly don't want you coming back for me. You are bats hit crazy if you think that I will wait here so you can come back and kill me too. The older man chuckled briefly as if amused. I don't kill those that interest me, he said before twirling the daggers in his hands a few times. He was wearing a black t-shirt that emphasized his unhealthy-looking pale skin, and the muscles that seemed to ripple under his sleeve tattoos on both of his arms. Just wonderful. The guy was looking more and more dangerous by the millisecond. Q shifted again to get off his injured leg, but it buckled beneath him and made him lean heavily against the wall. He was getting dizzy and lightheaded. God only knows what is gonna happen if I stay. There are worse things than death, he thought to himself. He grunted in pain. "'S none of your damn business," he repeated again, but his vision was darkening now. Damn, he cursed to himself faintly, I've lost too much blood, I should probably have waited until you were completely unconscious to do this, but oh well, the man said suddenly, then almost instantly sheathed his daggers and tossed the boy over his shoulder easily. He started to walk out of the alley to a building across the street. "What's your name? I might as well know it if I'm going to help you." "Put me down," Q said as he tried to sound angry while he attempted to raise his arm to use the pepper spray still clutched in his shaking hand, but his hand, it seemed, refused to listen. His head was spinning now, and as he was carried through the streets, his consciousness began to slip further and further away from him. The last thing he heard before passing out was the faint sound of the group that was chasing him. Their howls of rage rattled around in his head and were filled with anger and bloodlust. He moaned. Well, at least he was about to pass out, though he would never have thought his last moments would be like this. Q felt his breath catch in his throat, and his hands went to his mouth to stifle his gasps. This was different than what he was used to dreaming. Whoever it was running their tongue along his inner left thigh, their breath tickling his skin. A small moan passed between his lips, and he thought he heard a light chuckle from somewhere far away as his hand went to entwine his fingers in thick, soft hair to push them off. His body began to feel hot, and he tried to open his eyes to look at the person's face, but just as his eyes tried to focus on the other person, the purplet shot upright with a gasp of surprise. Q looked around wildly and wondered why the hell he was in a room he didn't recognize. A moment later, a man walked in the room. "So, you're awake." That didn't really take long, he chuckled and wiped away the small splotch of blood with his finger, then licked it off. Q started to remember what had happened, and fear rose up in his stomach. He tried to glare at the white-haired man, doing his best to look more pissed off and irritated than scared. "Where am I? And who are you? What do you want from me?" He went to stand, but then the world began to spin. That made him sink to his knees, and grip the couch tightly for support. "You're in my house, I'm Aloy's, and you seem interesting. For now, let's get your leg taken care of," the man said as he kneeled and reached under the couch to pull out a first aid kit. He hesitated for a second before setting it down and sitting beside Q. "Let me see it," he demanded gently. Q looked at Aloy's, and then at the man's hands. He blushed as he remembered his dream, and sharply turned his head away as he shakily adjusted himself on the couch. Q looked down at his leg and saw quite a copious amount of drying and fresh blood. He conceded with a small nod after a moment. "Is it usual for you to take in bleeding strangers?" he asked nervously. Aloys blinked and tilted his head. "If you count the 5 or 6 other idiots I have helped when they were younger, and as to why the first aid kit is under the couch, then yes. It's usual. Now show me the wound so that I can clean it," he coaxed, sounding a little impatient. Q blushed even harder realizing that. "You want me to take off my pants?" he almost squeaked as he instinctively closed his legs, and drew up his knees to his chest in reflex. The sharp pain made him hiss. "No way in hell am I stripping in front of the likes of you. Pervert." Aloys sighed. Do I need to use force so that I can tend to it? He asked as he stood and smirked. I tried it the gentle way. He leaned over Q and braced himself on the back of the couch, but I'll rip them off if I have to, he said in a low voice and reached for Q. That set Q off. Get away from me, he yelled, but his eyes were locked with Aloys and were being held there. He tried to push the tall man away, but as soon as his hand touched the other's chest, he found his hand clutching the shirt in his fist. A large range of feelings was welling up inside of him and he had no idea what he should be doing. Frankly, he felt hysterical at this point. Stay back, he ordered again, but his voice was anything but commanding. But you seem to be pulling me closer instead of pushing me away. Could it be that you actually want me to violate you? Aloys asked lowly and leaned forward until their faces are barely an inch apart. That's what it seems to me. His eyes gleamed with amusement and a hint of lust. I have no problem with that, love. This guy was definitely crazy. Stop calling me that and get away from me. In fact, I want you to take me back to where you kidnapped me from. Q swallowed hard and felt a buzz burning hot through his body. The longer he looked into Aloy's eyes, the more he felt compelled to be near the pervert. He forcibly let go of the man's shirt and tried to ignore his hooded eyes. Aloy's heavy gaze was focused on him, and Q had never felt more vulnerable in his entire life. He really needed to get out of here. I'll take you back after I have a satisfying meal, Aloys whispered and ran his fingers through the blood from Q's wounds and swiped his tongue over them. I'm famished. He then gently reached out to pull the other's pants off to get to his wound. But let's stop all that bleeding first. I don't particularly like seeing food go to waste. The fuck are you doing? And what do you mean by a meal? I'm not food. It was then Q's slow brain finally caught on. You are a vampire, aren't you? One of the fiends the police have been warning us about. Q tried to keep his pants on, but it was not used. In his weakened state, and against a vampire no less, he was completely defenseless. Soon he was in just his black briefs, exposed in front of the vampire who was going to drain him dry. Maybe, Aloys purred and crouched down between the purplet's legs. He began to suck on the wound and gently lap at the blood that had dripped down Q's leg as well. Oh God, he yelled before he could stop himself and couldn't help but shudder as the feeling of Aloy's wet tongue licking his hot skin. The hot tongue ran up the inside of his thigh before his mouth settled over the wound from whatever had broken in the fall earlier and cut him. He moaned as Aloy's tongue traced patterns. He tried to get loose of the vampire's grip once again, but he was just as useless as before. The best thing about my saliva is that it heals wounds, so you'll be perfectly fine once I finish, Aloys whispered in reassurance against the purplet's skin. After he made sure he had a good grip on the younger man, he started to suck and lick a specific spot before sinking his fangs into it. The feeling made Q moan loudly as he felt Aloy's teeth pierce his flesh. His nerves were rebelling, screaming at him to let the guy do whatever the hell he wanted if it meant feeling this good, while his head was yelling to get the fuck out ASAP. He panted, and without realizing it, his hands had gone to the head of white hair to rip the man off of him. The white-haired vampire slowly pulled from Q's thigh and sealed the wound as he withdrew. So, what would you like me to do now? You seem to want more and I'm happy to oblige. He licked his lips to get the rest of the blood off. Aye. Q fought a mental battle against logic and desire. I want you to take me back to where you found me. Q managed to say without shuddering or yanking that demon's mouth back onto his skin. He blatantly ignored his half-hard cock, and instead tried once again to withdraw his body from Aloy's grip. Well, you might not want to go back there, Aloy said and ran his hand up Q's thigh. He leaned forward until their faces were about an inch apart. So, what'll it be? The emu that I managed to get off your tail, or me? Make your choice, love. Q sucked in a breath. You didn't kill them, he asked, trying to pull his gaze from the vampires. Aloys shook his head. Did you drink their blood? Of course not, their scent was too vulgar. I wouldn't have bitten them even if I was starving. He wrinkled his nose. Your scent is so much better, he almost purred and started to lightly rub Kyo's dick through his briefs. That it took every ounce of dignity and control in Kyosuke not to thrust his hips into Aloy's hand. He couldn't, however, stop the whine that came from his throat. He squeezed his eyes shut, and put his hands on Aloy's wrist to stop him from rubbing his cock. He couldn't go like this. Being seduced by a vampire and becoming its next meal. Are you scared? Aloys asked, amusement clear in his voice as he leaned closer to Kyo's neck and nuzzled it. He slowly traced the artery with his tongue before he gently bit down, but not breaking through the skin. No. That's just you imagining things, the purple-haired man said indignantly and began to push Aloys off of him. Go find someone else to snack on. I am not a bloodmobile. Aloys felt solid under his hands, and for a moment the look in the vampire's eyes was absolutely feral. Kyo turned his head away stupidly in reflex and carelessly exposed his neck to the hungry demon. Damn his pheromones and glamour. Kyo didn't know which would end his life quicker. Refusing the vampire or letting him do what he wanted, but Aloys stayed where he was and chuckled. I see, you don't want to be used and discarded. Am I correct? He asked lightly as he moved his hand under the other's shirt, and lightly pinched one of his nipples. That's not the issue. Kyo couldn't stop his reaction as his nipple was suddenly pinched. His head was thrown back into the plush couch as Aloys gripped his hair tightly to nip at his skin. Kyo's chest arched into the man's touch as he tried to get away, or loosen the man's grip. Stop, please. Aloys, he begged desperately, fear starting to color his voice. Why should I? Your body is saying something completely different than that pretty mouth of yours, he leered. If you keep up all this whining, I will start thinking you want me to fuck you. Aloys situated himself between Kyo's thighs to grind against him and groaned softly. He suddenly sank his teeth into Kyo's neck, and let out a pleased sound as he tasted the fresh blood flowing into his mouth. No. He exclaimed weakly as his body responded to Aloys. His legs tightened around the man's hips as if they wanted to keep him there, and Kyo grabbed Aloys to press the man's mouth closer to his neck. He couldn't hold back the rush of want and pure desire that was now buzzing through him. The promise of being ravished by this man was overwhelming with him so very close. Kyo was a virgin in every sense of the word, so it disturbed him that his body was reacting too strongly, so whorishly, to the man between his legs. He didn't know if this was a normal reaction when a vampire bit a human, but he was sure if that was the case he would have already succumbed to the vampire and his pheromones and lust. He recognized he could still make decisions, that he still was in his right mind, but it was like his body was screaming at him that this was the right thing to do, and give in. NGH, he groaned, his clothed cock aching with want. He reached between them to push weakly at the other man with no real expectations that the vampire would stop. Shortly after, Aloys removed his mouth from Kyo's neck, quickly licking the wound to avoid any more blood loss. Sure you don't want more, love, he mocked and restrained the other's arms with one of his hands while he smirked. He used his other hand to roughly grope Kyo's dick and leaned close to his face, their lips nearly touching. No matter what I say, you are going to have your way with me anyway, right? Kyo asked, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment at his throbbing cock. Probably, but at least you'd enjoy it. Is that why are you so against it? You want me to ask you nicely? Like if I fucked a woman. Aloys slipped his hand into Kyo's brief so that the contact was skin on skin. If you moan prettily for me I promise to let you go, Kyo snarled through his heavy breaths, you are a monster. And to you, I am just food. I don't want to be anyone's plaything. His words might have been more compelling had his junk wasn't being manhandled. Vampires weren't as uncommon as they used to be, albeit still very rare, especially in cities like this where it was easy to hide from the eyes of the law. But regardless, he was mad that he was now a victim of this sort of thing. Why had he left the cafe? No amount of yelling was more humiliating than this. So you consider me a monster? I haven't been referred to using that word in a long time, he hummed before he completely pulled away and sat on the other side of the couch like everything was normal. Fine, I'll let you come to me of your own free will. Q was dazed for a moment at the sudden change in Aloy's attitude, but he recovered quickly, and dove to grab his pants and yank them up. He ignored the fact that he was as hard as a rock. He forced down the sexual feelings that remained from Aloy's attack and stepped away from the couch unsteadily. And would I be wrong in assuming that? You feed off of human beings, thriving on the blood you steal. And it will be a cold day in hell before I ever go to you willingly. Q's voice shook with anger and tears and rose with every word. He was so unfocused of his surroundings, and he missed the light sound of padding feet coming down the hall. Brother. A small girl, who had just walked out of a room and was rubbing her eyes, questioned sleepily as Aloys stood up and quickly went over to her. Go back to bed, dear. I was just out for a while. Go back to Kane, he said softly as a teenage boy pooped out next to her, his blue hair sticking out in all directions. He reached out to grab her and hold her gently to his chest to take her back inside their room. It seems your loud mouth woke her, Aloys accused once they're out of earshot. Q sputtered. How the hell was I supposed to know? And what sick fucker kidnaps an injured person, then takes him to his home to him with his kid sister in the next room? Q ran a hand through his long hair, cringing at its tangles and clumps. Shit, he shouldn't try to piss off the vampire who seemed to have given up. Look, I appreciate you letting me go. And I am sorry for waking up the kid, but it's mostly your fault. So take responsibility, he added, then mentally slapped himself. Shit, that wasn't what he had meant, Aloys just shrugged and got up from the couch. He walked over to Q. I might have said I would let you go, but I didn't say when, love, he said darkly, grabbed Q faster than the purplet could register, and tossed him over his shoulder. By the time Q could react and protest, they had already started towards the end of the hall. The door at the end was open, candles illuminating the dark space like some creepy gothic crypt. A bed was in the center of the room, surrounded by a 4-poster canopy, the dark velvet curtains swaying slightly as Q was tossed carelessly onto it. Aloys kicked the door shut with his foot, and turned the lock. Q shuddered with absolute fear as it clicked with a deafening finality. Listen to the full novel at FameTV.info, direct link in the description.